Hello, I'm Sara Jeffery, and this is my oral presentation for the module Positions and Practice. I came late to the Polaroid party. Despite being an analog photographer since my teens, I never used any type of instant film camera until I was in my 50s. Starting with a second-hand Polaroid camera, I now mostly use one of the newer instant film cameras from Fuji, which produce smaller, square or rectangular images. Wim Wenders's exhibition, Instant Stories, was a collection of 600 Polaroid images taken by the filmmaker between the 60s and the early 80s. The small prints captured the power of recording a moment in time in a format that could not be reproduced, highlighting the Polaroid's value in the role of storytelling. Making an image with a standard Polaroid or instant film camera is not a discrete process. All instant camera designs need to accommodate the full-size print within the technology and therefore are not unobtrusive. The sound of the camera itself, as it gives up its treasures, the click churn of the mechanism, will defeat any chance of a furtive shot in quiet surroundings. But yet, often I feel less self-conscious when using this camera than compared to others. Is it because people see it like a toy camera? Ansel Adams, Andy Warhol, and David Hockney are among established practitioners who have used them creatively in their artistic processes. I'm shooting with the greats. Of course, these images are not as instant as digital. You still have to wait for the image to develop in your pocket. But instant film images are tangible. Their rich colours are familiar and reassuring. The frame protects and preserves them like clothing around a vulnerable body. The items themselves cannot be reproduced, except by intervention from other technologies. The Polaroid image is a photo object in itself. It promises more than it delivers. The viewer is left to collaborate with the image in their hands and create a shared narrative. Mirrors and windows have long been a popular motif of photography. John Swarkowski, who curated the MoMA exhibition, Mirrors and Windows, in 1978, attempted to categorize photographers into mirrors, those whose work largely reflected the subjectivity of the artist, in comparison with windows, those whose work largely sought to see outside themselves. Of course, these motives are not discrete. A photograph can represent the inner motivations of the artist, as well as the objects pictured inside the frame. Looking at the work of British photographer Joshua K. Jackson from the view of Mirrors and Windows, you may consider that his work could be categorized as a mirror. His cinematic images incorporate temporary things and create unrepeatable moments, such as window displays and advertising hoardings. In his photographs of London, the images are rich in colour and reflect the multicultural city, adding another layer. Looking at my own practice, many of my images are subjective, synthetic reflections. Whilst they direct the viewer's attention to the subjects within the frame, many of them utilise the glass as a barrier. But by shooting this way, I hold back information, pushing the viewer to look more closely, to decide what is happening in the image. For many of us, our photographs and our practice start with imitation. The photographs in my childhood family album were mostly taken by my father. They acted as prompts for retelling stories of family history that were repeated and retold, particularly by my mother. She never took any photos herself until after he had died. For my sister and I, our roles as models in the family photo were typical. Under the male gaze, the father's gaze, we posed holiday celebrations in front of monuments, landmarks, or vistas. When we look back at certain photos of us as younger children, we feel the punctum of Roland Barthes, the piercing of an emotion, but we usually complied because of the complexities of the daughter-father dynamic. As we grew, our compliance would be more frequently on our terms, but it was rarely a collaboration. Historically, interpretation of personal pictures may be deeply unreliable. Annette Kuhn writes about disputing the interpretation of an image herself. Her mother has written a place and context on the back of the photo. Kuhn has amended the information. She feels the interpretation of the photo has been hijacked by her mother's gaze. The inscription becomes not about Annette, but her mother's own story. Women traditionally have been keepers of the past. My mother invested heavily in researching both her own and my father's genealogy. Was she looking to rewrite her history or reaffirm it? After all, she was one of the curators of our family albums. When my father died, she edited and curated the albums again. In creating this presentation, I have also curated my own edition of our own family album. Rosie Martin and Joe Spence collaborated on projects using phototherapy to support in the visual reframing of the family album. In my former role as a hypnotherapist and NLP practitioner, I've guided clients in reframing memories, not to change what has happened, but rather to change what it means to them. Annette Kuhn reminds us that family photos may affect to show us our past, but what we do with them, how we use them, is really about today, not yesterday. As I further consider what my family photos mean to me and think about how I choose to reframe the memories, I would like to explore family photography further and make this a part of an ongoing project, collaborating with my sister and extending it to include my own daughters.